Thank you. Minister, moving on to our next question, is named Deputy Holly Cairns.
Thank you, Ciara. Minister, previously when we discussed direct provision, you assured me that moving all remaining families in congregated living to owned or independent accommodation was a priority. You didn't mention that there was no assurance that this move would consider the wishes of the families concerned or the connections that those families have made in communities. So the question is, are families being moved far away from their communities to suit the department rather than the well-being of the families themselves? Minister.
Thanks, Deputy. As set out in a white paper to end direct provision and establish a new international protection support service, my department is currently working on implementing a new model of accommodation supports for international protection applicants. And under the new model, an applicant for international protection will initially be accommodated in one of 6 new integration and reception centres. An accommodation in an integration and reception centre will be own door for families and own room for single people, with specific supports for people with identified vulnerabilities. These centres will be newly built and operated by not-for-profit organisations on behalf of the state. Residents will remain in the centres for a maximum of 4 months, where they'll undergo a programme of orientation, support and integration. And once the 4-month programme is complete, if the applicant has not received a positive first instance decision on their application or is undergoing an appeal process, they'll transition from an integration and reception centre to accommodation in the community. A local authority allocation has been developed to determine the relevant proportion of international protection applicants to be accommodated in each local authority area under the new model. As the white paper is rolled out, efforts will be made to accommodate families close to communities to which they may have ties. However, this is dependent on where phase 2 accommodation is available, where it's been located. So my department can't provide absolute guarantees on that point. In the interim, a request for tender was issued by my department seeking additional accommodation for applicants for international protection, which enables families to be accommodated in independent living options. This tender is a key plank in the strategy to end the current reliance on emergency accommodation. The aim is to ensure that all families in the international protection process are accommodated in independent living options once they've completed the initial reception process, and the accommodation tendered under this process is now beginning to come on stream.
I suppose the issue, Minister, is that the department is doing some good, of course, but in a bad way. So everyone wants to end direct provision as soon as possible, and moving families from congregated settings, I think, has to be a priority. But it has to be done in coordination with those people involved. And a key criticism of direct provision is the undignified way in which people are treated, and the infantilising and kind of condescending treatment, from being denied the right to cook your own food to being moved around to centres at the whim of providers and officials. Parts of this are being replicated when you decide where people should be moved unilaterally without that engagement with them. Like you said, after they've had 4 months of integration into a community, to then just be moved somewhere completely different. Families could have built up social networks, children are attending schools, and the few who are permitted to work have professional connections. To simply move these families to where accommodation has been found to suit the department, but not necessarily themselves, just isn't the right approach. So I'm wondering, can this policy be changed?
Well, Deputy, you're very aware of the major pressures on accommodation across the country right now. So our department, like others, we source accommodation where we can. And we, as I say, where we're able to facilitate families in terms of where they've integrated, where they've made connections, we absolutely will seek to do that. But I'm just realistically not in a position to say I can guarantee that in every situation, because there may be areas where we haven't been able to secure accommodation. And we all know, as I said, that pressure that's there. So we will do our best. We want to change the system. We want to put people at the centre, and the needs of supporting the needs of individuals and families in the centre. But I'd be lying to the House if I was to make any absolute commitments. It's not possible to make absolute commitments on that at this point.
I think dignity is key here, Minister, and Deputy Connolly's question is next, seeking an update on the plan to end direct provision, but that process would be hollow if it's not based on consideration and respect. Unless dignified engagement with asylum seekers is embedded into the department's interaction with them, any new system will have in many ways failed before it even begins. And regrettably, Ukrainian refugees are being treated the same way, with no input into where they're being offered long-term accommodation. And I do appreciate the department is dealing with over 25,000 people, and I appreciate the pressures on housing that you spoke about. But engaging with people to do our best to accommodate them in communities in which they are working and children are attending school is a better approach, and ultimately it will prove more efficient as it avoids delays and disputes caused by the department dictating that they want someone to go in one place and then wanting to stay in another place. I'm just saying it's not a reason to not engage.
Again, and maybe moving on to the accommodation of Ukrainians, as you say, we're accommodating 28,000 Ukrainians right now. We're also accommodating 12,000 people in the international protection process. So we're accommodating 41,000 people in total right now. This time last year we were accommodating 7,000 people. So it's a huge increase in a year, and that has put real pressure on the system, and that means that the delivery of choice that you spoke about there in terms of Ukrainians is just not possible right now. It's not a situation where I or my department are pleased to be in, but our objective in the context, and we have to recall in terms of Ukraine, it is a wartime context still. Our objective is to provide safety and security, and we've been very clear, and the Taoiseach will be clear and has been clear with the President, that's what we're offering Ukrainians coming here, safety and security, but we can't offer choice, regrettable as that might be.
Minister, our next question is in